We are through 3 weeks of Legacy Leagues action, and all 4 teams that won in week 3 find themselves in the top 4 of the standings through the first 3 games. So we'll see if that continues on throughout the season, but we're here with the week 3 post-game show, and I have a full crew tonight. 6 analysts here to break down all the week 3 action, where the closest game, and I'm looking quickly, might have been my own game of 18. No, the Duyes boys and Warriors, which was the game we kind of spotlighted last week. But no game finished in single digits, but it doesn't mean we didn't have some good action and some good things to break down. Let me let you know who's here. We have Zach, Kaitlyn, Ryan, Nick, Simon, and Sydney. I told you it was a full house. We will get to all the games, and all the games are also now live streamed, so you guys can go back and watch and see who's telling the truth from the post-game show. But you can watch all those on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/legacy_leagues. We'll continue that throughout the year as well. We had some really good reviews on that. But let's start with that Warriors and Duyes boys game. And we had some comments after the podcast last week run by the Duyes boys. Let me remind you. But it might have been Spence who was like, so wait, the Duyes boys are saying the Warriors are favored. And I could have sworn they were doing some reverse Jedi mind trick stuff, favoring the Warriors the week they play them. So then when they win, they're underdogs and they get that whole story. The Warriors took it to them in the fourth quarter, and we'll focus on that. But it is the Warriors improving to 3-0, one of our 2 remaining 3-0 teams. But the Warriors beat the Duyes boys, and let's get the margin on that one for you, 81-64. And we're going to focus on that fourth quarter, which is exactly what PJ, the captain of the Duyes boys, texted me on my way home, like right after his game ended, was talking about like that fourth quarter and how much of a struggle it was for the second week in a row for them to score only 6 points for the Duyes boys in that fourth quarter. This game on court 1, so I know we can go to everybody here. So we'll just go in order on my screen here. We'll go to Zach first, since he's back for more this week on the post-game show. But Zach, let's talk about the Warriors first, who I think have been overlooked, and even the Duyes boys, when they predicted their top 4 teams, that they kind of left the Warriors out. And that was a statement game for them in week 3. Like, no, we're here and we're one of those top 4 teams. So you guys figure out who's not in it anymore, because we're 3-0 and we deserve, especially after that game, to be in the top 4 and to be in contention, as Charles Alexander said in his post-game interview. But Zach, looking at that game and kind of that game as a whole, what did the Rhode Island Warriors do that impressed you and helped them get their 3rd win?
Yeah, Charles Alexander had a monster game. Like it says right there, 43 points. He was lights out from start to finish, physical, very aggressive, going down low, even hit 4 threes. And it was back and forth a lot. And then it seems like the Duyes boys just fell flat in the fourth. Like they were gassed, which is surprising because they have one of the best depths in the league, but struggled.
Yeah, and let's go to we'll get Sydney on here. I know I can't even see her right now. There's so many of you guys on my screen, but I know she's there. And Sydney, you can touch on whatever you'd like from this game, and then we will focus on that fourth quarter. Like you can see there, 28-6. But what stood out to you from this one in week 3?
Kind of what Zach was touching on, like Rhode Island Warriors only had 5 people on the bench, so it seemed like they would be gassed earlier with Duyes boys having like a big bench, but they didn't let them keep up the pace, and they kind of slowed them down a little to keep their wind and keep their gas so they could hold on for the whole 4 quarters. And they definitely outshot them a little towards the end, which definitely was a factor that helped them clinch that big win.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see what other victim I have. We can do we'll do Nick, and then we'll get some of the new guys on here. But I know Nick was here in week 1, and so as you see, Charles Alexander there, 43 points, 17 rebounds, and definitely was the key, and was hitting threes, made 4 of them. A lot of big dunks that I know we'll see in our highlight videos this week. But we'll go to Nick, and then we'll let everyone else jump in. What specifically in that fourth quarter? I mean, 6 points isn't going to do it. It was a 1-point game with 7 to go. All right. So even in the fourth quarter, the Duyes boys were in it. And going back and watching that fourth quarter, just nothing went their way. A couple turnovers. They used their last timeout relatively early, in my opinion, so they couldn't even kind of stop it and regather, and it kind of just downhill flowed from there. But we will go to, Nick, and what in that fourth quarter, stood out to you.
So I think we've talked about Charles Alexander a lot. I mean, 43 points is huge, but what you don't see in the box scores is leadership. I remember specifically in a timeout, Duyer's boys, it was back and forth game for all three quarters really, and then the Warriors pulled ahead in the fourth. But in a timeout specifically that the Warriors called, Charles Alexander got the team together, and you could hear him say, our offense is completely fine. Our offense isn't the issue. It's defense. They're scoring too easily. And as soon as he got everybody together, they made a game plan. They identified what the issue was, and they figured out how to stop them. And once they figured out how to stop them, the offense came even easier. I mean, the momentum, all the steals, getting stops, made it so much easier for them to pull away. I also think what's not being talked about, Marvin Dowdell not being present at the game is crazy. I mean, to start the game, they only had 4. Charles Alexander showed up late, and the Warriors still made it a close game until he showed up in the first quarter. But seeing Charles Alexander being able to lead the team completely on his own with 43 points without Dowdell is something that the league needs to take notice on and start looking out for in the future.
Yeah, definitely their leader. That's awesome. That's stuff you won't even see on the live stream. So good job, Nick, paying attention during that timeout. We'll go Kaitlyn next. And even two things I'm looking at is a shooting percentage. So I know over 50% for the Warriors and under 40% for the Duyer's boys. And a lot of time that relates and correlates to the rebounding, right? If one team is making more, there's just less rebounds, and defensive rebounds are more likely. There's less of those for the other team to grab, but not necessarily a margin of 44-19, which was the advantage for the Warriors in this one. So that is a little more than just one team making more shots, Kaitlyn. And I think that rebounding edge, again, it goes back to the Duyer's boys' lack of size, but that rebounding edge was huge.
Yeah, I think that was one of the keys to the game. The RI Warriors out-rebounded them by 25. And as you said, if you get the ball more, you're going to have more opportunities to shoot. And that's what it ultimately came down to. So I think in the future, the Duyer's boys are going to have to out-rebound teams to win games.
Yeah, and we're going to do something on the Duyer's boys this week about how, even though they've lost 2 in a row, I mean, the pieces are there, and one of their pieces missing this week, Desmond Williams, who played in week 2, of course, right, comes when they're playing my team and then misses the next game. No, he was at work, but that would have helped their scoring. He's one of their bigger players, so you would like to think it would help on the defensive end as well, and even with some of those rebounds. Ryan, definitely want to focus on this game a lot, so you can go any direction you'd like, but the Duyer's boys maybe not having one of their better creators. You guys saw Brian Yars kind of flash back a little bit to, it's been talked about. He was an MVP of the league on a 3 seed when he first joined the league. So it's in there, and he's a great player. He had 26 and was, found that range 5 for 9 from 3, but not enough as the Duyer's boys lose their second straight. Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah, I feel like Duyer's boys obviously have all the depth. They're probably one of the deeper teams in the entire league. However, nobody really stepped up for them in the fourth. And like you were saying with the rebound, it was most evident in the fourth quarter how many fast break points the Warriors were getting. I think we saw Charles Alexander multiple times go coast to coast all by himself. And then, like you said, he had 17 rebounds. Duyer's boys had 19 total. He almost out-rebounded the entire team. So him running the fast break, him getting assists, and just getting the Warriors out ahead so quickly is what made them pull away in that fourth quarter, I feel.
Yeah, and that we're going to go to Simon, and I know there's a lot of you guys, but that's totally all right. We'll get to Simon in a second, but even just looking at some of these offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency ratings that were posted by the podcast today, shout out to the not yet doctor, Dan Ruggiero, as he's going by this week, because he's going to be a doctor, but he's not yet a doctor. Don't confuse him, even though he's been called a doctor before. Lob City leads both categories, but then it's the halfway crooks game breakers. And really the key is the Warriors are second in defensive efficiency so far. The Warriors are, and the Duyer's boys are 6th. And the Duyer's boys are 5th in offense. And just to kind of focus on the Warriors, they're 4th in offense. So, 4th, 5th, kind of around the same thing. But the key there is some of the Duyer's boys stats. And And Simon, even looking at the box score, what stands out to you? I mean, Brian Yarst, 29, Corey Bardsley, 11, Lucas with 10 after a huge week one is kind of cooled off, 3 for 11 shooting, and, not really much else there. And then for the Warriors, they only had 5 guys. So there's only so much, balanced scoring you can do. But Charles Alexander, 43, Henry Kangava's 15. And I think even from the highlights and obviously being there, he made, number one, made some of those hustle plays and those attacks to the basket they needed throughout that first half, especially. And their new player, Aiden Dozos, with 13. And he had some highlights as well. So Simon, even looking at the stats and kind of taking it into next week, even, the Warriors get ready next week, and you can even help preview this one a little bit, to take on Lob City. And we'll have some injury news for Lob City when we get to them in a second, but Warriors Lob City is going to be a good one. And so Simon, what do you take from this game as we kind of look ahead about what they did and how it can apply to next week?
I think the Warriors need to keep that energy going, especially with the rebounding. Having all their players getting at least 5 rebounds is huge. And having Lob City being a very, very dominant and big team, they got to keep that energy going and get those rebounds.
Yeah. And I lost me. I was scrolling through all of you guys, making sure we hit everybody. Yeah. And I think, just to focus on next week a little bit, that'll definitely be a game to watch, the Warriors and Lob City. The Duyes boys get ready to take on the Ice Trays in week 4, who the Ice Trays just lost to Lob City. And we'll get to that game in a second, because that one was another Lob City special of getting out of hand early and then kind of continuing on that pattern. But let's get to the halfway Crooks and Air Mambas. Air Mambas are 0-3, but not for, lack of trying. They had a narrow defeat in week 2 and came back in week 3 without Mario Valerio and still made it tough. But it was another big third quarter for the Crooks, who win 66-48 and get their second win on the season. If you want to see Spence spray his teammate with a water bottle, go check out the post-game interview. And I'm not calling him by his new nickname, but he knows what it is. So when he listens, he'll get a good laugh out of that one. He got a GIF of his new nickname instead of the shout out on the podcast. But I am bad at preparing, and I forget exactly who was on that game. I believe Zach was on court once. So we're going to go back to him, and that'll give me some time to figure this out. But Zach, the halfway Crooks halftime, an 8-point game, too close for me. That was kind of our motto at halftime. Like, no, we don't like to mess around like that. And then a 25-13 third quarter edge. So what flipped in that third quarter as the lead was able to balloon to 20 and then kind of stay that way through the fourth?
Honestly, a big part of it was Jeff Winchell. He had a monster game defensively, 5 blocks. It's the second game in a row with over 5 blocks. Last week he had 7, and he was very physical down in the post with multiple poster dunks. He kept it physical, and they could not respond.
Yeah, and I think the only other one, if I'm correct, is Nick, who was on court 1, and then that means everyone else, is that right? Just give me some head nods, was on court 3? Maybe Ryan?
I was on court 1.
Okay, good. So we have Ryan and Nick coming up, and I'll get the stats up here on the screen in a second. We'll go Ryan next this time. So Ryan, the Air Mambas, and even if you only saw them this week, I'll tell you some of the bright spots just from playing against them. But what's the bright spot for them? And I know, we're not here to, do that to an 0-3 team, because ultimately it comes down to wins and losses, but they played tough again and they have the pieces. So what did you see this week that you kind of like from them that they can build on going forward?
Well, I did see them play the second week, and Mario Valerio was fantastic in that game. So for them to come out and keep it close in the second week was very impressive. And they were scrappy with it. They out-rebounded them throughout the entire game. And I do think they played tougher than the halfway Crooks probably in the first half. It just wasn't sustainable because they do only have 3 guys averaging double-digit points, and Valerio was one of them, and he wasn't there. So it was that offensive production that I think just came up short in the second half that was part of the Air Mambas problem.
Yeah, and we'll get to Nick, who can touch on, I think the rebounding wasn't even as bad as, I know I'm scrolling fast, but it was pretty even. And that was kind of what I was going to touch on. So in addition to everything, that Ryan mentioned, they have 2 big guys who are even hitting threes. And I know 1 for 6 and 2 for 5 for Anthony Ramsey and Olajide Roland. Doesn't seem like a lot, but they didn't take a ton. And that's for your 2 biggest players to be out there hitting shots. it just stretches the defense and kind of adds another element there that the defense does have to watch. But that doesn't take away from that interior presence that those two have. And in a league where there's a height limit, you get some bigger players, like we'll talk about Dominique Langston in a second, who is a guard in real life, right? If we're going to talk about real life, but in this league, he's one of the bigger players. So sometimes he ends up playing down low, let's say on defense, even though he's a guard, right? And so I'm sure Anthony Ramsey and Olaji Rowland aren't, centers in real life. Maybe they are, but in this league, they play that way. They focus down low. And that's kind of, I'm sure, one of the keys that Nick can touch on, as well as, that second half for the halfway Crooks.
Yeah, I think what stands out the most with halfway Crooks is between them and Lob City are two of the biggest teams. When I watch halfway Crooks, the paint presence alone is just overwhelming. Just watching how the other team is able to guard it. And I think Air Mambas in the first half did a good job at controlling that, especially Devin Pena in the first half. He was way more quiet than he was in the second. But I think just looking at the threes alone, it seemed Air Mambas weren't afraid to shoot. And I think against halfway Crooks, if you're able to make them, that's not a bad strategy at all. Because, I mean, how else are you going to score if when you go down low to Devin Pena and Jeff Winchell? The only issue is in the second half, they weren't falling the same way that they were in the first half. So if you can make them, great. Unfortunately, it wasn't very sustainable offense. But if they can continue to work on that and fall on that for the rest of the season, you could definitely see improvement and see a win.
Yeah, and you can take it as being salty, but some of those threes in the first half were bank shots. So let's not count on, banking in threes the entire season. All right. No, but your point's valid. 9 for 32 for the Air Mambas from three, and 4 for 12 for the Crooks, who really changed their ways and really, have been attacking. And shout out again. I'm not even going to use the nickname. I swear. Spence Freeman, 17 points, 7 for 11 and 1 for 2 from three. I mean, again, let's do it every week. That's the dream. Spence Freeman, keep it up. Because, last year we'd see a higher 3-point attempts and some of them not falling. But all it really does, like we talked about last week, and I won't get into it, it bails out the defense because Spence has been so good attacking and putting the pressure on, in addition to Dom Langston and everybody you guys mentioned, Jeff Winchell, and Devin Pena down low as he goes by, because we messed up his name all last season. But yeah, that's enough on the Crooks. Let's talk about who they play next week. Next week, the Crooks take on Ball Don't Lie, one of our 2-0-3 teams, as the Air Mambas take on the Game Breakers. And that's kind of where I want to go next for the Game Breakers, who, from what I heard, and I'll let you guys jump in sooner on this one, were down 8-9 points to Ball Don't Lie, I believe, in the second quarter, probably the first quarter, from what I heard from Ellis after the game when I caught up with them. And then they end up winning by 26. So a huge flip. We can go to, let me open up that box score to get it right. I mean, a 22-6 second quarter, and then doubling them up in the third quarter, 32-16. And that's going to be the game. And then I'm sure, it kind of held to that the rest of the way. But we will go Simon first this time, who I know was over there on court 3, because if you weren't on court 1, you were on court 3. But it is the Game Breakers improving to 3-0, and Ball Don't Lie showing some signs of improvement, but also falling to 0-3, like we talked about with the Air Mambas. So those teams will play. So the time is coming. The time is coming. But Simon, the Game Breakers, and I know we're going to talk about, I saw a lot of the highlights, the up and down and the fast-paced play for them. Another team doesn't have a lot of size, but we'll get to the stats more in depth too about how they're able to kind of make up for that. But what'd you see from them and the Game Breakers in week 3?
From them, I saw a lot of energy. And the chemistry looked very good with them. After pretty much every score, I was seeing them high-fiving and celebrating, especially towards the end of the game when they knew they were going to win. But during the game, I think all of their players had double-digit points. So it was an all-around, like, very well-balanced game.
Yeah, and we'll go right over to Kaitlyn, who I know is believe been on court 3 a couple times now, but especially with Ball Don't Lie, let's kind of focus on that first quarter where they were able to get a lead, as you see Ozan Cermak with 28 and 15. So I'm sure he was a big part of that. Ellis hit 5 threes, which also helps. And, you know, if those all come in bunches, that can be a huge boost for a team like that. But Kaitlyn, what in that first quarter specifically allowed Ball Don't Lie to get a lead? And then how do they replicate it, right? And do that for more than just one quarter?
Yeah, they came out hitting shots, and I think they were more ready to play than game breakers. And as you said, Ellis and Ozan combined for 11 3-pointers, which was big. But as the game went on, they turned the ball over a lot and stopped making shots, and the game breakers were able to get more points off fast breaks. So for the future, I think Ball Don't Lie needs to take care of the ball more and keep the energy going throughout the game.
Yeah, and we'll get Sydney in on here about the game breakers, but I'm going to check really quick. I mean, they matched 3-pointers made nearly, but it took the Ball Don't Lie 11 more attempts to do it, right? As you can see there, 15 made threes for Ball Don't Lie and 14 for the game breakers, but those extra attempts, long shots, long misses, and I'm sure played right into the game breakers' hands. Sydney, even on the game breakers, they improved to 3-0. I know we've all kind of seen a lot of the teams now a couple weeks, but Gian Avedijan leading the way, and, you know, Joe Secator still doing his thing, and 3 of 8 from 3. I mean, they're shooting it better. Hachi with 23, so that kind of, they're forming the big 3, and no Charles Correa. You know, we'll shout that out, and you guys may be like, you know, why are we mentioning him? One of the most talented players in the league when he's there first, and then when he's like on, and it most of the time relates to each other. When he's there, he's on, and you guys will see it. He'll be there one week and you'll be like, oh yeah, now this makes sense why Joey was saying that. But Charles Correa kind of rounds out, and David DePina as well. So, you know, we talk about a lot of the players for the game breakers, but Sydney, I mean, focusing on them, 3-0. We'll get to who they play in a second, but this was a game where they, you know, even Hachi said in the interview, they played sloppy and then kind of turned it around. So, you know, what were they able to do to turn it around and stay undefeated?
Yeah, definitely coming out of the game, they looked a little sluggish, a little slow, not really a high momentum going on. And when they were losing in that first quarter, I think something clicked that they couldn't do the whole game that way. And so they just picked up the pace, picked up the tempo. They had a lot more connections with long balls and getting people down the court faster. And they were able to just run the ball better, I feel like, once they realized that they couldn't like take the week off, I guess.
Yeah, that's the cool part, you know, and it goes back to even playing the Air Mambas. You know, it was closer than we would have liked for longer, and I'm sure it kind of hit the game breakers there in that first quarter, like, oh, yep, we need to play here, you know, and actually do some things successfully for a little while to kind of put this team away. And that just goes to the competition level for sure. And shout out to Ball Don't Lie, who are, like we talked about, doing things, you know, to definitely keep looking for their first win. Game breakers, like we talked about, take on the Air Mambas in week 4. And we already talked about it. Ball Don't Lie gets the halfway Crooks. So yeah, can't wait for that one. Love playing some Ellis. What a little rematch from a couple seasons ago as well. But the last game we haven't talked about will be the first game we saw in week 3. Lob City took down the Ice Trays 92-61. Lob City was coming off a loss, and the Ice Trays had squeaked out that week 2 win against the Air Mambas, and it was all Lob City. If I can find the box score, all them from the jump, 23-10, and even, you know, on the live stream, I mean, they kind of came out, and I know Jose mentioned it in his post-game interview, really got back to attacking and not taking as many threes. And I think a lot of that, which we'll see kind of throughout the season, goes towards who they're playing and the type of game their opponent plays, right? So if Lob City is able to get a lead, they don't have to feel like they need the threes. They can kind of rely on what's working. They were down against the game breakers, and they almost came back and pulled it off without Colin Burns. And I'll get to some injury update from him in a second, but they didn't have him, and were still able to attack and finish off the Ice Trays, and you know, double-digit lead at halftime, and really never were threatened in this one after that first quarter. We'll do a couple of you guys because I mean I'd rather kind of focus on some of the bigger picture stuff as well. It's a lot of the same things for Lob City, but I'll get their stats up here in a second. We didn't hear from. We'll go back to Ryan. Ryan, were you on the post-game show before too? Possibly week 1?
Post-game show now.
Okay, cool. Never mind. Great. So back to Ryan for Lob City. What'd you see from them early about setting the tone that helped them build that lead and then kind of cruise to their second win on the season?
I think a lot of it was shot selection. Like you said, they weren't taking many threes. They were attacking, and not only were they attacking and getting high percentage shots, they shot 61% compared to Ice Trey's 35. But they also were able to shoot 10 more free throws. So they were getting to the line more. They were dictating the pace of the game, which prevents Ice Trays from getting in any kind of rhythm. And everybody was playing Lob City's game to begin with. It wasn't the Ice Trays setting the pace.
Yeah, and we'll go back to, does anyone have anything good before we kind of talk about the Ice Trays a little bit? I mean, both teams had bright spots in this one, and the Ice Trays kind of continue to figure out who they are as a team. I'll put Nick on the spot. Why not? It's all right. He looks kind of ready. After, I'll talk about some stats while he figures out what he's going to say. But Carl Lee, 32, led the way. Jose Mercado, 29. And then a big drop for Lob City is Nuri Mahmoud with 12 and Cody Crawford with 10, who was back on the court this week after missing last week. Let's drop some of that injury news before we get to the Ice Trays. Colin Burns, 1 to 2 weeks, he should be back. He had a back injury, which held him out of nearly all of that game against the Game Breakers. And so that result we will see again. We will see that matchup again in week 7. Hopefully Colin's ready to go and at full strength by then, but we'll probably see him in July. One more week, week 4, and then we do have a calendar week off for that 4th of July week. So I would expect to see Colin doing Colin Burns things in week 5, just in time for Lob City to take on the halfway Crooks, which look at that. It never fails. But for the Ice Trays, Nick Lemoyne, 14 points, Terrence Gallo, 12. And I love the nickname, and I guess it's the only nickname I'm going to get to say today. The Milkman, which is the best nickname in the whole league, Justin Titsworth. I love it. 11 points, 3 threes, some big shots for the Ice Trays in back-to-back weeks. But Nick, all right, you're on the spot. Even the Ice Trays, I mean, 35% shooting, 36 from 3. Obviously, they want to get that up, but what's something they did well? And I know it's a little weird because when the game gets like that, it's hard to see and you're not really, it's a different game when the lead gets like that. But what did the Ice Trays do well in your opinion? And what can they take into week 4?
I think the biggest thing they did that stands out is how, regardless of the score, they didn't stop. If you look back at the live stream or any highlights posted, Ice Tray was not afraid to get in the paint. They weren't afraid to get highlights of their own. They had a few dunks, a few good step back threes that looked really good and looked like a team that was, if you didn't know the score, looked like a team that was playing to win and competitive, regardless of the score. I mean, not to throw any shade any which way, but week 1, Lob City blew out their opponent. Was it Ball Don't Lie? And I mean, by halfway through the third quarter, it kind of seemed like Ball Don't Lie was just kind of giving up and just trying to wait for the game to be over with. And Ice Trays definitely did not do that. They were keeping the energy up. They were keeping the pace up. It just wasn't enough, unfortunately, because Lob City is Lob City and their defense is just too overwhelming and hard to beat.
Yeah, and I think this goes back kind of all of that. Totally agree. And I think this goes back to that point on the rebounding. I mean, the Ice Trays technically out rebounded Lob City 28-24, and Lob City shot 61% from the floor and sure 5 of 20 from 3. But yeah, when you're shooting that much of a difference, I think that kind of goes to the rebounding edge, which did go to the Ice Trays. We've already talked about a lot of the opponents. The Ice Trays in week 4 take on the Duyes boys. So both teams 1 and 2 coming in. So that'll be great. And then Lob City looks to knock the Warriors off and hand them their first loss to kind of even those two teams up in the standings as the Warriors take on Lob City in week 4. You can watch all the week 4 action, as we all have talked about, on our YouTube page, youtube.com/legacy_leagues, live streaming the games. And that court 3 game which in week 4 is Ice Trays and Duyer's boys, so the battle of 1 and 2 teams. That game is either on Instagram or our Facebook. So you just have to follow us everywhere. It's all right. And you'll get to watch all the games live, as well as our Snapchat highlights and other coverage. Before we get to, we're going to do some X Factor and some, players who elevate other players on their team. And I kind of want to get everyone's opinion on which player they think best elevates the other players on their team. And I think it's a good conversation to get into, especially as we kind of get into the whole season and you see different matchups. It's kind of cool to look at players from that perspective. We did see our first power rankings last week, and I know the Duyer's boys had some comments. We lose 1 game in 3 calendar years in the regular season, and we're 5th in the power rankings. And let me just say, once again, on the record, the power rankings aren't the standings. So, and it doesn't matter past seasons. I like to put that out there just to keep it, keep it straight for everybody. If you're looking for the standings, they're over there. The power rankings are, and they're not always right, but are more based on this season and kind of getting rid of the records. And if the teams were to play, who would be favored? So guys, who hasn't talked in a while? We'll go back to Zach first. We'll put him on the spot. So again, you can pick any player, but let's try to get a little variety here. We'll go down the road to each of you guys as we kind of look ahead to week 4 and the rest of the season. Which player to you that you've seen best helps the other players on their team be successful? Okay, so which player elevates the rest of the players? Not necessarily the person that scores the most, the person you're going to see in our scores graphics every week, maybe not even in the MVP discussion. It could be one of those, but which player, Zach, to you, maybe it doesn't have to be someone who isn't as recognized, but that'd be cool, but also has a huge impact on the game from what you've seen through 3 weeks.
I mentioned to me briefly earlier, but I'm going to go Jeff Winchell. He was DPOY last year, and from the looks of it, he's well on his way of going again, because even though he didn't score a single block in the first game, he's gone 7 and 5 in back-to-back weeks, leads the league in blocks, leads the league in blocks per game. That defensive threat, that's hard to go up against.
Great pick. So it's 2 weeks in a row. Zach's really milking the whole, pick halfway Crooks thing. Love it. You never change, Zach, never change. If you say around Jeff, he didn't have any blocks in week 1, he will fake, try to like choke you out and then he'll laugh and he's a really good guy. I'm kidding. He, it's like they missed my blocks and whatever, but he's always around the rim impacting shots, even when he's not blocking shots. And he does also get his hands on a ton of shots. A lot more this season, getting out to that corner, getting out to that 3-point line, and even getting some tips on those, which it's like they've been talking about Wembanyama being able to contest at the rim and also at the 3-point line. I'm not saying freaking Jeff Winchell is, Wembanyama, but he's impacting shots all around the court, and it's just something for the other team that they have to keep an eye on for sure. All right, we're going in order on my screen so I don't mess it up. Kaitlyn, that means you're next. So again, which player elevates the players on their team, the best that you've seen so far?
I think Gian Alvardizian for game breakers, not just because he contributes points wise, but he just encourages his team the whole game and gets them the ball. I mean, he had 7 assists this week and 12 rebounds, and he's always looking to pass and encourage others to shoot. So I think he impacts the game and impacts his team the most.
Yeah, great pick and a former MVP. I mean, he dropped 90 last year. Let's not overlook that. I don't care. They only had 3 guys, so he had the ball all the time. But again, you go try to do that. So 90's a lot. 90's a lot, even when you have the ball all the time. That's a lot. All right, that means Ryan is next, but great pick on Gian, and we'll definitely be talking more about him. But let's also shout out, and he's the first to share on social media. He's had some big blocks this year, and that's something that he's always contested shots and played defense. That's not my point, but the actual highlight blocks of meeting someone at the rim and protecting the rim for that team has been huge. Like we've talked about, they don't necessarily have a big man. They are playing and defending the rim in a different way. And if they keep that up, that might eliminate some of that concern of their lack of size when they play some of the bigger teams. But shout out to him in some of those blocks. Ryan, who's your player, your elevator player, as we're going to call him?
I think I'm going to have to go with, for the game breakers, Haitatula Mini. 17, 6 and 6 on the year so far. And every game I've watched with him, he's just simply done what is asked of him, whether it's on the boards. If he has to turn it up and score 20, close to 30 points, he does it. and yet he's still one of the guys higher on the rankings of assists per game in the entire league. So he's a guy who, and like I said, 6 boards. So he's obviously crashing the boards, getting the fast break going. So he's producing points every facet of the game. So I think I have to go with him because in each game I've seen from him, he's had a positive impact everywhere.
Yeah, and he had a epic all-star game last year, if I can remember, and was like a replacement because somebody couldn't make it, and then he jumped in. And whether he won MVP or should have won MVP, like he had that type of all-star game. Again, that's a whole different setup, and you guys will see that this year and how that's different, and different players, perform better in that type of setup where everyone's kind of sharing it more than normal, but especially on the game breakers as well. Everything you said is exactly right. And he's done that throughout his Legacy Leagues career, and I'm sure throughout his, basketball career before Legacy. Just really impacts the game for that team and is a huge part of that team, even though we may talk about some other players on that team more. Nick, who's your elevator guy?
I would say Nuri, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yep. Nuri Mahmoud. Yep.
On Lob City. I think each week he does what the team needs, whether it's scoring. He had 22 points first week, 16 second week, and 12 this week. But if you notice, each game he fills another part of the box score, whether it's week 2 he had 16 points and 10 rebounds. Week 1 he almost had a triple double, and it seems when you watch Lob City, he's constantly the first one back on defense, defending, and then whichever player on Lob City gets that steal or block, because it's bound to happen, he's the first one on the other side of the court ready to either throw a lob to someone or dunk it himself. I just think he's the most all-around player that Lob City has. He's always where he needs to be and always doing what the team is lacking in that specific game.
Yeah, and you guys haven't seen too much of Greg Holt, and not to, override everything you just said. My point to that is Greg will have the ball a lot, which you guys saw a little bit of in week 2 and kind of initiating. And then that gets me to the point of Nuri's been that initiator. Jose will have the ball a lot. Colin will have the ball a lot just because they are scorers, and Cody, will also try to initiate. But it is Nuri who's that team's, I think, most important initiator for their offense to consistently do what it needs to do when they play a Game Breakers, when they play a Rhode Island Warriors this week, and a team that's going to keep pushing and keep coming. Yeah, we're going to see for sure. We'll need a big Nuri game against a Rhode Island Warriors team that is going to try to pick up the pace and beat them down the floor. All right, Sydney, somebody else. Who's your elevator player so far through 3 games?
So my elevator is on ice trays. Number 5, Doug Whedon. I think every time he steps on that court, he just brings a different intensity to the game, and he's always trying to find his way into the paint or finding open guys who are in the paint. He's always attacking. And then even on the defensive end, he's not one of the bigger guys, but he's still getting up there for the blocks, and he's still really scrappy on the floor. So I feel like he's just leading by example for his team. Maybe not one of the top scorers, but definitely has the intensity that Ice Trays is looking for.
Yeah, and I think for that team, they're going to continue to mesh and continue to get better, and he's going to be a huge part of that. All right, Simon, last but not least, that's for sure. Who's your elevator guy?
My elevator guy is Spence Freeman on the halfway Crooks. I think that with the energy he brings to the game and the confidence he brings, he's able to get his whole team just ready for the game. And throughout the whole game, you see him always cheering on his teammates and telling everybody like, good job, doing their job, everything like that. And especially in the first interview I did with him, I could tell right away that he's just a great team player who loves the game and will do anything he can to get his team to win.
Yeah, and we've talked about him a lot because, he's on my team, but you guys are seeing some of the best ball he's played, and it's cool. It's very, very cool to see. Constantly attacking, finishing at the rim, and he's very, very good at that. And so when he gets in that mindset, it's fun. So you guys are getting a show with him. And just 2 other players that I know we've already talked about throughout the show, but Brian Yarst definitely needs a shout out, and you'll see that more with the Douillet's boys, just kind of doing whatever the team needs. I think is a really good way to frame it. And this week it was scoring. right? Without Dez there for the Duyes boys, and he kind of picked that up and always playing defense, but always getting the right people the ball as well. And it's going to be a lot on Brian, I think, for that team to reach its potential, for him to kind of be a distributor, and he has a lot of things well, but it's going to be on him for sure. And then Charles Alexander, I know we talked about him and his, 43 points this week, but in addition to leading, like you guys talked about, which was great during that timeout, I mean, he's been the consistent one for the Warriors to get them to 3-0, whether it's scoring, driving, shooting, defense. He's one of their bigger players, like defensively, in the paint as well. So yeah, shout out to those two as well. And there's a few others, but we're not gonna, then people will be mad if we leave certain people out. So there's obviously more, but those are all really good picks. And that kind of wraps up our post-game show. Anybody have anything else? I mean, I think we covered it. You guys get one word. This is one of my favorite things to do. You get one word of what team. There's no explanation here, and then we're getting out of here. So I'll say a name. You're going to say one word of what team you are most excited to see in week 4. So Zach, one word. So it's a team name. That's it. Oh, sorry. I muted you. Go ahead, Zach.
Breakers.
All right. Simon.
Bob.
Okay. Kaitlyn, good job. So far, we're following the theme here. Nice. Good job, Kaitlyn.
Warriors.
Okay. Ryan.
Warriors.
All right. 2 for the Warriors. Nick.
Warriors.
Wow. All right. Sydney.
Lob.
All right. And that's everybody, right? I got Ryan. I'm pretty sure he said Warriors. Yeah. When in doubt, they said Warriors. Mine will be Crooks. So have fun with that. In case you guys had no idea who I was going to say. That'll wrap it up for the week 4 post-game show. Good job, everybody. Breaking down the games. You can watch all the games live again on our YouTube page. Search Legacy Leagues. Follow us on social media for 2-Minute Drill. Top Plays. The podcast for this week is already recorded if you want the Duyes Boys version of this show, but they are actually doing their spreads on the show. They're making game picks for week 4. And like I said, they are doing on that show their key for each team to be a contender. So I think some other segments for them, in addition to recapping the games and how torturous it is for them to have lost 2 in a row. I unfortunately know how that feels for the Duyes Boys, but Dan Ruggiero and PJ Thomas back on that one for this week. We'll be back next week before, like I talked about, we take the week off, but 3 weeks down, 5 to go. Math is hard. And that'll do it for the week 3 post-game show. We'll see you guys in week 4.